the video. So one of the topics that's been coming up recently is which MCC course do I do? In particular, in the Q&A session, which I did a couple of days back, we spent quite a bit of time on that. So as promised, I said I would make a video just sharing some of the thoughts and considerations that I put into it in selecting which MCC course I was going to go for. So this video, I'll split it down to four main areas. The first one is timing. When should I be thinking about looking and picking an MCC course? The considerations that I went through in picking an MCC course as a modular guy who was working full-time and had to balance that. And then also I'll talk a little bit about the training that I received. And then finally, I'll touch on how that helped and what advantage or disadvantage it gave me when it came to securing a job and subsequently to that when I was actually in employment. All right, listen in. So the first one is really when should you all be thinking about selecting an MCC course. So the advice I'll give is start as early as possible. The reason for that is the MCC course is probably the most important part of your training that you'll do because that directly shapes what the airlines will be assessing basically in terms of when you start to come to look for a job. So for myself, as I said, I was working full-time and I really had to sort of find something that was going to allow me to balance that around my job. So I started basically roundabout towards the end of my IR building. As I was about to commence my IR, I started to look around, and I'd say if you can, as a modular person, certainly do a plan of how you expect your training to roll out, and then from there, some of the considerations that will drive that plan is, how much money have you got, when would work best in terms of work holidays and so on and so forth. And also the other one is school availability. A lot of the good courses are booked up months in advance, so you want to, if you like, reserve your place early on. Okay, so the next part I'm going to cover is what considerations did I give. So first of all, disclaimer, I'm not endorsed by anybody, I'm not in anybody's marketing team. I'm purely just sharing my process that I went through as a modular guy working full-time to try and pick an MCC course. So as I said, approaching the end of my IR building, getting ready for IR, I started to look around and sort of try and figure out what I was going to do in terms of the MCC course. So the considerations that I had basically is, at the time, there were near enough, if you like, 3 tiers of courses that you could do. The first one was just a base MCC on a generic device, typically around about 20 hours, something like that. And the cost of that was, a couple of £1,000, basically. Now, these courses were great, and a lot of people were getting jobs through these courses. But one of the things that was very apparent to me as I was asking and getting feedback was probably about 50% of people who had a CPL, MEIR, and just a base MCC course were failing airline assessments. And this was not missed by the heads of training around, and then they got their heads around and said, well, look, this isn't really a good solution where the students are going and doing what they're asked to do, a CPL, MEIR course and MCC course, but half of them are still failing airline selection. So they then put their heads together to try and come up with an MCC course, if you like, that would actually fit the requirements of what the airlines are looking for. And that gave the advent of the APS MCC on there. Now, if you like, the second tier, of course, was an enhanced MCC, which basically now is an APS MCC. And I was looking at that and I was thinking, okay, fine, that was one of the products that was on offer as well. Now, the final product was there were a number of organizations that were offering an MCC course, but also with the benefit of going into a whole pool and placed by an airline. So when I looked at this, was it worth spending a little bit more to have this feature? And it just depended, if the job market was very good, then I was hearing stories of guys getting jobs on the afternoon that they'd finished the course with the airline. But equally, if the activity and the recruiting by the airlines wasn't busy, then I heard equal stories of people sitting around for 6, 9, 12, 18 months in a whole pool trying to get airline placement. So I didn't really think it was worth paying the extra money to to be potentially sat in a hold pool at the time. So I ended up going for the APS MCC in the end. So what drove me to make the decision to go for the APS MCC, knowing that it was quite a lot more expensive than the base product? Well, it was just the numbers that were coming out. I consider myself a very average pilot and nothing more than that. So I said, you know, I want to give myself the best chance of passing an airline assessment and airline selection. And in fact, the numbers, these are not my numbers, these are just numbers that are around on the website, is APS typically moves the pass rate towards 75, 80, 85, 90% during airline selection. So again, a disclaimer, just because you do an APS course doesn't guarantee you'll get a job, because there are many other factors that play into it. So for example, what's the recruitment market like? What's a specific airline looking for? But my target anyway was was a UK low cost or European low cost carrier. So yeah, that's if you like, that's what drove my decision to do the APS MCC. Okay, so the next part now I'm going to talk about is how did I find the training on the APS program, and was it worth it? So yeah, I thought the course was absolutely amazing. The APS MCC was, you know, I learned a huge amount on the course. Just in terms of the course outline, what did we do? So you spend the first 4 days doing theoretical knowledge basically, and you go quite in depth into some of the aircraft systems on the platform that you'd be working on. For myself, it was a 737-800. And just a little, if you like, a little tip. What I found was, if you did the APS MCC on the device that you ended up being on employment in, on the aircraft type that you ended up being in employment in, which for myself was a 737-800, it actually gave you a little bit of a shortcut of a head start in the type rating, because you've seen a lot of, or you got to see a number of the items that you would work on later in the type rating. The APS course is not, the APS MCC is not a type rating course. It's supposed to be a multi-crew course, but still you do get that, if you like, hidden advantage by doing an APS on the device that you're going to go through. So yeah, after the theoretical knowledge instruction at the start of the course, that lasted 4 days, we then pretty much straight away into a full blast of sim sessions. Now, what I liked about the APS, again, this is one of the learnings that it gives you in preparation for the type rating and also airline employment, was our sim schedule was we had 4 days of sims, 1 day after each other, and then we'd have 4 days off and 4 days of sim, and then 4 days off and 4 days more of sim. And that's pretty near enough copy and paste of the schedule and the pace that we're doing on the type rating. So it got you, if you like, acclimatized to the pace of work and the volume of work also on the type ratings. And you know, I don't think I'll be lying if I said it very much made the type rating curve a lot less steep, just because you're used to a lot of the stuff. So I'll give you an example. Before our simulator sessions, we'll sit on the mock-up of the aircraft and practice our flows and procedures and calls, and almost kind of go through each sim on the mock-up. So it meant that by the time you got into the sim, you're fairly familiar with what was going to happen, and it'll be quite straight. And then you had more capacity then to learn and absorb the multi-crew lessons, if you like. And I think that was really important. That helped me a lot on the type rating on there. I think also what was really helpful was seeing a lot of the non-normals and getting to manage some of the more complex situations. For example, diversion management, engine failures, cabin depressurizations, and so on and so forth. So it meant that by the time I got into the type rating, it was not such a huge shock to the system. And you know, of course, the type rating goes in a lot more depth, but as the material starts to come to you in the type rating, you're looking at it, it's okay, I've seen that before. It's not a big deal, and it's fairly comfortable. So all in all, yeah, you know, again, I'm not on a sales pitch for anybody. I'm just sharing the truth and what I found, or if you like, the benefits of the APS was it definitely made the type rating a lot less steep. To that, and then also, which I'm going to come to in the next point, is it made the airline assessment part of things also fairly straightforward. All right, thank you. So the next, or the final part of, if you like, this video I'm going to focus on is how did the APS MCC course help me with initially job selection, or getting getting a job. And then after that, did I find anything else that was useful out of it? So in terms of airline assessments, I was fairly lucky. I finished at a time where the market was fairly good. It certainly was not stagnant as we're finding now, particularly with COVID-19 and all the rest. So I guess, yeah, timing certainly played on my side. But even with the fortune of having a fairly buoyant job market and so on, that was not a guarantee that you were going to get a job. So specifically, when I was looking at going to airline assessment, one of the things the APS course really helped me on was because it was on a Boeing 737-800, and 3 of my airline assessments actually were on that exact same device. Now the aircraft type has certain quirks to it if you're not used to it. So for example, because the aircraft has underslung engines, each time you make a thrust setting, the aircraft will pitch up or down. So if you increase the thrust, the aircraft tends to want to pitch up. If you reduce the thrust, the aircraft tends to want to pitch down. Now, again, going back to the thing, I'm a very average pilot, so I'm sure there's other pilots out there who are a lot more capable than me who would probably be able to get there straight away if they hadn't been on the device previously in an assessment. But I wasn't that type of person, and having the APS MCC helped me because I got to feel some of that pitch power coupling. You also get to get a ballpark figure for what the thrust settings are going to be. So one airline assessment of mine, I was given an engine failure, and I knew that, okay, in an engine failure scenario, I'm probably looking at about 15% more thrust than I'm used to on the given engine. And it's just those little shortcuts and those little tricks that suddenly start to stack up and give you then the extra capacity that's needed to demonstrate in an airline assessment scenario that, hey, you have got the capacity to pick things out, you have got the capacity to have the slightly wider picture. And it's, again, I go back to it, it's not because I'm a great pilot, I'm a very average pilot, it's just purely because the training was so good. I guess the other one on the airline assessment factor, which I'd like to add, is it's quite a high pressured and quite a stressful day, and the airlines do a great job to try and make it as an enjoyable and a relaxed process as it is. But frankly, as the candidate going in, you probably know that you've got one shot at this, and if you don't get it right, you probably won't have that opportunity probably for at least 12 months, if not more. And that's assuming that the airline is willing to consider your application again. So it's almost like you really have one chance at it. And anything you can do ahead of time to just take away some of the stress. So for example, the wow factor of getting into the sim for the first time and seeing the device, again, that can play psychologically onto you as if you've been in the device already and you know, okay, great, this is what the assessment is going to be. It's quite relaxing, you're used to it, there's nothing new there. The other thing also, which the course also really helped me with, was having, if you like, a lot more redundancy within myself. So you get used to doing these really long sim sessions, 4-hour sim sessions, perhaps with a short break in, and that builds a lot of resilience into you. So during the airline assessment, on 2 out of 3 of my airline assessments, I ended up being at the airline assessment for most part of the day, and just through to luck or the luck of the draw, I ended up going last, and it ended up being quite a long day. So you imagine you've been up quite early, probably not a great night's sleep because you've been worrying and so on, and now suddenly you get to the end of the day and you now have to pull out of the bag a pretty good sim performance. And the APS helped because you get the match fitness you need to be able, after a long day still to be able to fly a decent raw data approach and so on. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think for the airline assessment, for the practical flying side of things anyway, that was great. There's other areas of airline assessment too, like, so for example, the HR interview and group exercises and so on. I'll make a separate video on those areas just to try and give some of the tips and some of the learnings that I found. So great. Got the job. So how did the APS MCC help me later on? Again, this is not me on a sales pitch. It's just purely what's been found is that APS guys tend to have no issues typically within the type rating, and that was certainly true for me. I was paired up with great pilots during my type rating, but they perhaps hadn't done quite as much of the sim work that I'd done. So although they were perhaps a lot more experienced that I had, they tended to struggle with certain aspects, not because I'm a great pilot, absolutely not, but just simply because they were not exposed to those areas. So it definitely flattened the curve during the type rating for me. The other area was subsequent, before I move on the type rating, the type rating is also a pretty big financial investment from yourself and also from the airline. And one of the things that's perhaps not particularly well publicized or particularly well written in all the flashy ads and so on is if you have an issue during your training, in certain cases, if you need extra or remedial work or something, that cost can sometimes fall to you as a student. So when selecting your MCC course, part of the objective of the MCC course is to de-risk potentially having issues later on the type rating. As I found, it's much better to have a bad sim session during your MCC course and get to work on it there than to suddenly find during a type rating course, through no fault of your own, you know, a lesson hasn't gone down particularly well, or certain goals haven't been met, and then having the added stress of the cost and having to go and redo lessons, you don't really want that. So anything you can do at the front end to shallow that is a lot of work. So that's near enough all I've got on the type rating. I think the next part of it is during your line training. It's been found that APS guys typically finish the line training quicker than, or are able to get through it, you know, around about 25% less sector, something like that, than somebody who'd just done a base MCC on a generic device. That has a lot of benefits. Initially for yourself, you get to earn more money selfishly, but also it means for the airline, they can release you out of the training environment that much quicker and then get somebody else line training, because there's only a finite number of line training captains about, and so on and so forth. And you know, one of the key things that you're trying to do in order to land an airline job is to build a picture that you're going to be a safe pair of hands, not a training risk. And really, the airline is taking a safe bet in giving you that opportunity. And I think this overall picture it certainly helps to do the best MCC course that you can afford. And for me at the time, it was the APS MCC. So as I say, I hope I've answered your questions. You know, just to recap, I've spoken about the timing of when you should look for your doing an MCC course as early as possible, the considerations that I've made myself, what I found of the course, and then finally the advantages that it gave me at the end. Thank you for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel if you do like the content. Thanks.